And good evening and welcome to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. And my name is Sue MacDonald. I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals and the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. And it's my pleasure to be chairing this session this evening, which is now it's week 11 of series 17. And I'm delighted to be joined by Caroline Bull and Judith Rees this week. So welcome. And because we do this to our beautiful presenters, we ask them to share in the moment of the week. And I know that our listeners really enjoy that bit. So perhaps I can start with Judith. Could you share your moment of the week with us?
Hi, welcome everybody. And so, my moment of the week is I've recently had my 10th grandchild, a little boy, and I know I'm going off to see him this week because he lives 2.5 hours away. So I'm really excited about that. So that's my
Oh,
moment.
wow. Did you say 10th?
10th,
10th.
yeah, 10th.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow. Congratulations. That's delicious. That's wonderful.
thank
Thank
you.
you. That's lovely. And Caroline, you have a moment of the week.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I've been on leave this week, but I did get to go and see Wicked, the new, well, Wicked for Good, I think it is, which I thoroughly enjoyed. There was a reviewer that said it was being like licked by a very friendly Labrador, and I actually think that's a really good description of it. It's very, very over the top, and fun to watch, but yeah, I really enjoyed it.
We've had our lovely presenters giving their moment of the week, and I'm just going to talk a bit about the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, which we started in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, the first lockdown, and it was really an idea to get our midwives, our student midwives, anyone in maternity services actually to have some sort of linkage and information. Because at that time, there was very little known about COVID, for example. So we were sharing all the information about COVID, services, how services were changing, how education had to be adjusted for student midwives and all that sort of thing. Really very creative information at that time. And of course, COVID's it's still there, but it's not having the impact that it had at that time. But we've carried on and we've really focused on things of interest to midwives and student midwives. So we love you to share. For those of you who might not have come across that before, we don't expect payment for extra sessions. You want to share this with your colleagues, your friends, fellow students, that's fabulous. I have to say, this is all looked after by our lovely friends at Matflix, which you'll see on the resources page that Paul's sharing on Facebook, that you can access Matflix and access some of the previous presentations, which is really good. If you're doing any dissertations, projects, any sort of research at all in practice, or if you're doing any course, and if you're a student midwife, obviously, it's very good because you get very contemporary information, very evidence-based, really useful. And again, you can access that. It's certainly if your university has a link up to Matflix, or if your maternity unit has a link up, that's really good. But there is a little subscription if you choose, which is also quite useful. And I'm going to say, well, we've been in Edinburgh. I'm doing a little news features now. We've been in Edinburgh this week, yesterday, for the Maternity and Midwifery Festival. We've had fabulous speakers, fantastic participants, lots of student midwives and midwives, and people wanting to become student midwives, which was lovely. And it was lovely to see Jenny Minto, who's the Minister for Health and Women's Health, and she did a keynote speech. That was great. Also highlights for me Professor Mary Renfrew's session, Why Midwifery Matters, and to women, babies, and society, actually. Fabulous session. We'll try and rerun some of that over the next few weeks so you all can get a little taste of what we were talking about. And then we had Jenny Patterson Diamond talking about the role of love in midwifery. And that was also a kind of change of pace, but something really important for us to think about. And Professor Helen Chain discussing postnatal care and the challenges that midwives face. And I think her session was really fascinating because she was sort of highlighting how much the sort of changes to practice, the changes, things like cesarean section rates are having on women and babies, but also on midwives, and what midwives can do. And guess what? Midwives are quite busy. And that's what it is really underlined, like super underlined, really interesting. And we were delighted that Professor Renfrew and Professor Chain were also awarded Lifetime Achievement Awards, very much rewarded. And then I'm going to come right to the end of this sort of little news. I haven't, I've been focused so much on the festival, I'm afraid. No, I'm not afraid. It was great. I want to say a big happy birthday to Sheena Byram, who everybody knows. Anyone who's a midwife knows Sheena Byram. She's 70 yesterday. Happy birthday, Sheena. But also we need to acknowledge that 70 is the new 50. Good. Wonderful. So I hope you had a good birthday, Sheena. I'm sure she'll be watching this. Now I'm going to now focus, and I'm so sorry that little break. I don't know what happened. It was possibly my computer because I'm still in Edinburgh. You'll see my background is a lot tidier. I haven't got all those bookshelves that need a little bit of sorting out behind me. So that's why it's a bit different, and I'm having to cope with this computer, which may have caused a problem. I hope not. Anyway, this evening we're going to be looking and domestic violence and abuse and supporting women and supporting practitioners to support women. And it's the week of the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And we're looking at this in the context of maternity services. And we need to acknowledge actually midwives are also impacted by domestic abuse and violence. And I'm using both terms together, though my colleagues may have a different perspective on that for me, and I'm looking forward to being updated possibly on that. And I'm just highlighting now a bit of a trigger warning, because this is a difficult subject. For some of you, this might be really difficult and even painful. And if you're finding it difficult, you might just cease for now and come back later, or maybe get a colleague or a friend just to support you if you're feeling upset about it, or it brings up horrible memories or anything, and anxieties. And be aware of your own well-being. We're always so busy looking after other people, we need to look after ourselves as well. And if you find it too painful, there are some support numbers and information in the resources package, which Paul is making available online, and they're there to support you. So I'm just putting that trigger warning at this point. Now I'm going to introduce Caroline Bull, who many of you will know. She's a specialist midwife for domestic abuse and substance misuse, and she's based at the Rosie Maternity Hospital in Cambridge. She's been a practitioner for 13 years. And she has a caseload of women who are subject to abuse within the perinatal period. And she's developed domestic abuse and routine inquiry training with the emphasis on challenging domestic abuse myths and improving understanding of coercive control. And she presents locally and nationally, and also is an author. And I'm really grateful to Caroline. She's on holiday, but we've dragged her into work. And she was very enthusiastic about coming to speak this evening, and I'm delighted to welcome her. So Caroline, the screen is now yours.
Oh, hello, hi. My name is Caroline Bull, as already said, and thank you for listening to me today. I've got a lot of things to go through, so some of it is going to seem a little bit rushed, but I wanted to just do a snapshot really of the kind of training that we do. I started off by just talking a little bit about my role as a specialist midwife. We know how huge an issue this is. I think statistics came out just today that 3.8 million people are subject to domestic abuse in the UK. And we know that a woman is killed every 3 days in the UK as well. But I think what I wanted to focus on today is going straight into something that we call the homicide timeline. And the reason I'm going to do this is because Judith is going to talk later on about the experience of the baby and thinking about how the baby is subject to abuse. But I wanted to focus on the woman's experience here today. And the most important thing that I found when this research was published back in 2019 is, for the first time, there was research that actually matched the lived experience of the women that I was supporting on my caseload. It's an incredibly important piece of research, but we use it all the time in our office for assessing risk, but also it really helps understanding how domestic abuse is not an isolated incident. It's not the red mist coming down and somebody suddenly losing their temper. It's all about power and control, and it is a pattern of behaviors. So what I'm going to do is actually go through this within the context of pregnancy. Okay, so we're going to go through each of these stages. Now, the vast majority of cases do not end up in homicide. However, many of these highly abusive perpetrators do is follow the early stages of this timeline. So just starting off, if we imagine at a booking appointment, for example, we might know that the partner or ex-partner or anyone has a pre-relationship history of being a perpetrator of abuse. Now, this can mean involvement with the police, but it can also just be something that they sometimes give themselves away. So this is when we hear, and community midwives will be aware of this one, where they hear the ex-partner described as crazy, that the ex-partner makes up lies about them. It might also be that they have children that they don't see. Why don't they see those children? And this is the point where we know that this is a really big risk factor for moving on to becoming an abusive relationship. The second stage in the timeline is the way that the relationship escalates really, really quickly. And I see this a lot in my caseload. So what happens is somebody meets somebody else, the relationship goes very, very, very fast. So probably the best description I have of this is they met New Year's Eve, moved in New Year's Day. She was pregnant by February. So what happens is a very, very intense early stages, early declarations of love, moving in very quickly, very early pregnancy, like I say. And what is happening here is that the perpetrator is looking for commitment, because once there is a commitment to this relationship, they then feel entitled to maintain control of that person. So we've then got a relationship which is dominated by coercive control. And I think it's really important to understand that there may be no violence. There may be no violence until a homicide. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the relationship is dominated by coercive control. And we'll talk a little bit more about those tactics in a bit. You've got this relationship, lots of coercive and controlling behaviors. The woman's world is becoming smaller and smaller because her whole world, in a way, is expected to rotate around this perpetrator. What happens then is you have a trigger. Now, this is a trigger where this can be anything. The most dangerous trigger is separation, when the woman or mum attempts to leave the relationship, but it can be all sorts of other things. Pregnancy can be a trigger. However, we have to understand that pregnancy may not be a trigger as well. And I get really frustrated when I say that DA starts in pregnancy. I don't believe it does. I think there is already an abusive relationship and pregnancy is a trigger. So you've got, but as I say, sometimes perpetrators will keep women pregnant over multiple pregnancies, because of course, pregnancy in itself can reduce economic independence, can make someone more emotionally dependent on them, makes it harder to get away. So you've got this trigger, but just to be clear, it might also just be putting the soup back in the wrong place in the cupboard. Okay. What happens to this trigger is the perpetrator's sense of control is challenged. So there is an escalation of tactics. Now, these tactics can really vary. They might include violence. They might include silent treatment. I know from women on my caseload, the silent treatment sometimes is almost the most painful for them, really hard. Perpetrators will completely ignore them for days and days and days or weeks on end. This escalation, the sole purpose of this escalation is to get power back. Okay. Now, in pregnancy, like I said, you might see this escalate in the pregnancy, but where we know the really key time for escalation is actually in the postnatal period, because a new baby, and I'm sure Judith will talk about this, can be very threatening to a perpetrator's sense of control. Babies are very difficult to control. They cry, they need their mother. There's a very sort of relationship that they might find threatening to them. And I think one of the things that you will often see, and we'll talk about this, is the undermining of that relationship between mother and baby in the postnatal period. So I know I had a an example where a woman, she was not allowed to see or pick up her baby when they cried. And for a whole week, she was not allowed to go anywhere near the baby. The baby just cried and cried and cried. And when this woman finally did get into refuge, she didn't put that baby down because she had not been allowed to go to her baby. And I think how hard that must be for her. He didn't want that. He had complete control over her, and she did not feel that she could do that. So you've got this escalation, and actually a lot of the time it works. It's really successful. The woman understands that when these things happen, the tactics escalate. So you go back to stage 3 with the relationship dominated by coercive control. And what you have is a cycle where you're going around 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, round and round and round and round and round. However, what sometimes then happens is you get to side 6. Just to say, back in 5, one of the things you might also find is that the perpetrator actually leaves the relationship. They've lost control. They actually decide, you know what, I'm going out of this relationship, which then brings them back to 1. Okay, so your first stage. But also it means that we see them again. So I've been in this job for 5 years now, and we see the same perpetrators coming through again and again and again with new partners. And that is because they are following this cycle. Okay. So we then get to set 6, which is a change in thinking. And this is where what the perpetrator does, they're less interested in getting the relationship back and more about punishment at this point. And this is where you sometimes see that they'll take them through the family courts, often will use the children as a way of punishing the mother. There might be calls to social services or threats to social services. I should say, back in escalation, threats to refer to children's services and baby being taken away are a very common tactic of perpetrators throughout pregnancy. It's a really effective way of maintaining control. If you tell anybody, they will take your baby away. And that's an incredibly frightening thing to have told to you. So we've got this change of thinking. And this is the point where, as I say, they choose to punish. And in the worst case scenarios, they then decide that they are going to kill their partner. And when they do, they plan it. I think Professor Monckton Smith had one where he planned it for 5 years. They look it up, they do Google searches, they really, really plan it meticulously. And then at the end, there is the homicide. So we don't, this happens. Women are, we know they are murdered, as I say, every week. But as I say, for most of us and for the pregnancy, we see this point in the middle here, just going round and round and round. And this is why when we think about routine inquiry, it's really important to understand that risk is not static. So at one point in the relationship, if you are doing routine inquiry, for example, when you're in that relationship in stage 3, she might not tell you at that point. But if you're in escalation in stage 5, she might be really frightened and she might actually feel that she wants help at that point. So I so often get asked, why do you ask about routine? Why do you do routine inquiry all the way through pregnancy? Can't we just ask once, And my response to that is we would never ask about fetal movements just once. We wouldn't ask about fetal movements at the beginning and go, that's great, lovely. We're not going to ask about that again. In my mind, this is the same. Risk is a constantly changing thing, and we have to be aware to ask when it's safe to do so throughout the pregnancy and in the postnatal period, and understand those triggers and those escalation patterns. And that will help us understand the risks to the women that we are supporting. So that's a very quick version of this. I do recommend anyone to read her research. That was a very quick run through of her, but it's very, very helpful. So here I just wanted to look a little bit in more detail about those tactics. Okay, so we do talk about them as tactics, and that is because they will use sometimes a scattershot approach to various different kinds of tactics, whatever works. And sometimes what works to get back control is being really loving. And I know I had one woman who told me that, one day he'd be lovely and the next day nasty. And it was this constant going between lovely and nasty. And these are attempts to pull her back. But we know that there are lots of different tactics. So we know isolation is a key tactic. And of course, pregnancy is an opportunity in a way to disrupt that tactic because the woman is starting to come and see health professionals. She will see and encounter more health professionals through her pregnancy. She may not have been to a GP for years, but will start seeing them. So we can help with that. Gaslighting, that's that way, make people question their sanity. Silent treatment, as I say, threats of suicide. Now, Monkton Smith says we should always take, when the perpetrator is threatening suicide, very seriously, because it could be that they are at the point where they're thinking they're going to kill themselves, but they might also kill their partner. So we need to take those threats of suicide seriously. But I have to say, it's such a common tactic. It's probably one of the most common tactics that I see on a daily basis with women in my care. They threaten suicide, and it's very, very effective. Women often, in my experience, they may have separated. He threatens suicide, they go back because they're terrified of that. So threats of violence, as I say, harm, punish, or frighten. Non-fatal strangulation, any kind of airway suppression, we have to take very, very seriously. That increases the risk of homicide by 8 times. Undermining motherhood, harm to children or pets, love bombing, as I say, jealousy is a key factor. So there are lots of different tactics, and as I say, they will often use different ones to kind of whatever is most effective for them. I can't see any time, so bear with me. Okay. So this brings me to the work that's being done on domestic abuse, and I've just put Kat Tobacco is doing a lot of work in this area, and to me, that is such a clear statement. Domestic abuse is common. This is not unusual. This is happening to the women in our care every day. We are more likely, and I'm here in the hospital now, to have women upstairs who are subject to abuse than have experiencing gestational diabetes. It is hugely widespread, and unfortunately, we are not very good at spotting this and supporting women. We know in Embrace report, 22% of the women were subject to DA, either prior to or during pregnancy, and there were 14 homicides. But in a lot of the work that Kat Tobacco has done in this area, they found that unfortunately in the case reports, in Embrace reports, domestic abuse was known about, but the midwives did very little about it. And to me, that was hugely shocking, because I think I'd always thought in a way it was because we didn't know. We can't help what we don't know about. But what we found in the Embrace reports was that actually midwives did know it was there, but they often didn't do the appropriate signposting. They weren't doing routine inquiry, and they were doing things like saying, oh, okay, so you're subject to domestic abuse, we'll refer you to mental health support. Which is great because she may well need mental health support, but it's kind of misunderstanding the cause of her anxiety and suffering if you're doing a referral to mental health and putting her on antidepressants, for example. So it is really important that we as midwives and student midwives understand we have to do this. This is a very scary statistic. 62 women were killed by a current or former partner. More women were killed by their sons than by a stranger. Now, if you believed all the news, you would think it was very dangerous out there, but actually women are most at risk in their home. Okay. And I think this last point as well is that we often in the notes, what you see is a lack of information about the partner. Sometimes their name isn't even put down. I cannot tell you how important it is to understand the role of the perpetrator in this. We need to focus on them, and that's why the timeline is so good. We can't be looking at the woman and blaming her. And there is a lot, unfortunately, we did see a lot of victim blaming language, sort of inability to maintain personal boundaries. As you know, this is her fault that this is happening to her, and we really do need to not do that if we possibly can. I'm aware I haven't got much time, but routine inquiry, please ask. Routine inquiry, routine part of good clinical practice, even when there are no indicators of such abuse. So we should be doing it at every opportunity when it is safe to do so. And if there is disclosure, we should be referring appropriately to specialist advocacy support, MAREC, Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference. Clare's Law, has he got a prehistory as a perpetrator? We can do Clare's Law. But routine inquiry is probably the most powerful tool that we have in the box, that we should be doing that whenever, as I say, it's safe to do so. I just wanted to finish quickly. This is the dash. I'll miss that for now. One of the things that there's more work being done about now is suicide and domestic abuse related suicides. And this is a huge area that I think really only beginning to be understood. Suicide is the leading cause of death in domestic abuse cases, and suicide obviously is hugely significant in embracing maternal deaths. They are not separate issues. We need to be looking at how domestic abuse impacts women's lives on a daily basis and understanding how that leads to suicide. And I'm just going to finish quickly because I'm aware I haven't got much time. With Professor Jane Monckton-Smith also has done a timeline towards suicide. And I think what's important here is you can see it's quite similar to the original one, but what we do have is that women do who end up taking their lives, is there is often a disclosure. They do tell somebody, and then they actually look for help. But when they don't get that, or when that help is not there, they then feel that complete sense of hopelessness and entrapment that happens within an abusive relationship. And then suicide feels like the only option way out. So again, this is where midwives have such an important role, understanding that women who are subject to DA, it has a hugely detrimental impact on their mental health and can, in the worst case scenario, lead to suicide. So we have to think of all these things at the same time and not just put domestic abuse in a box by itself over in the corner in the safeguarding box. It goes all the way through everything we do, every single aspect of the care that you give. You need to be thinking, is this woman subject to abuse, and is that impacting her care and her relationship with her baby? So yeah, I think I'm done, am I, Sue?
I think that's perfect timing, Caroline.
Okay, so I do apologize. Very whistle stop. I do apologize, but I hope I've got the message through about routine inquiry. That is really the most important thing that everybody can do, and yeah, that all of you can do whenever you see anyone alone. So please do that.
No, that's fabulous. Thank you so much. I think the escalation issue is really important, and I think was really useful to have as a sort of framework for us to work with. So thank you so much for that, Caroline. Now, if you have questions for Caroline, just put them in on the little chat box and they'll come through to us for the end question and answer session. So thank you, Caroline. Now I'm also my brain is a little bit full now with all Caroline, but thank you for that. And I'm so pleased to have Judith Rees with us. She was driven by an unwavering commitment to safeguarding babies and children and joined the For Baby's Sake Trust in 2015 after 33 years in the NHS. And she has expertise in midwifery, health visiting and family nurse partnership and safeguarding roles. And she's pioneered her devotion to early intervention to empower families to break the cycles of domestic abuse and building brighter futures. She is the Chief Operating Officer in supporting the For Baby's Sake Trust to achieve its vision to reach more babies impacted by domestic abuse and give them the best start in life. And I think that would be supported by any midwives and certainly any mums who are affected by domestic abuse. So welcome, Judith. The screen is now yours, and thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you so much. Am I sharing yet? That's what I'm just going to ask the question.
Just wait, it always takes a few minutes.
I'll share my slides. Can you see them? Can you see them?
Not as yet.
Okay, 1 second then.
I think there must be gremlins in the system
I think
tonight.
there is. Yeah.
Sorry, Judith. This looks hopeful.
This looks better. Okay, are we looking good? Oh, good, lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you, Caroline, for your fantastic presentation and leads so brilliantly into my session, which is more about, like you said, keeping the focus on the baby, but also the whole family response, and actually where there's hope and how we can provide support for the whole family, including those that are perpetrating the abuse. So as Sue said, I work at the For Baby's Sake Trust, and we're a whole family response to breaking cycles of domestic abuse. Our vision at the Trust is a world where babies and children grow up free from harm of domestic abuse, and to provide and promote therapeutic, trauma-informed support that breaks cycles of domestic abuse and give babies the best start in life. Caroline did a great job of sort of the scale of domestic abuse, but this is also some other stats from a YouGov survey that was commissioned by our trust. Again, 1 in 5 children in the UK experience domestic abuse when they're still in the womb. 1 in 3 parents have experienced a partner using abusive behaviour towards them. 40% of parents who experienced domestic abuse said it occurred during their baby's first 1,001 days from pregnancy until the baby's second birthday. And again, that high risk time post-birth as well as in pregnancy as well. And 1 in 3 parents who experienced domestic abuse said they didn't know where to look or begin to look for help, which is really shocking, isn't it? And then it really brings us back to that routine inquiry and that time when parents, women are going to be in contact with health services. So really asking the question, and the research tells us that women say, ask me, ask me, ask me. We also did, because the stats out there is so poor, is a freedom of information request to the police. This was earlier this year. And from this information that we received, we estimate that approximately 750 babies are present at police call-outs for domestic abuse annually. And we know babies in the womb and young babies are victims in their own right from the Domestic Abuse Act 2021. And you can see, I'm not surprised, the amount of coverage that picked up, that the amount of babies are there that are at those police call-outs, but very often not then passed on to services for the parents to get the support that they need. We also did the freedom of information request to local authorities, again, to understand the number of unborn babies that are referred into social care where there's domestic abuse. And from this, we estimated that around 50,000 babies were referred each year with domestic abuse as a factor. And you can see there, again, the media coverage that picked up when we released those stats, including the Metro in London, who ran a feature on that, and also with parents that have been through the programme, that actually what a difference it makes when that support is there. So why do we start in pregnancy? I think Caroline's sold the story brilliantly for me, but experiencing domestic abuse impacts life chances for babies and children. So as well as what happens, for that experience for the woman who's pregnant, it's also the life chances for babies and children. And we also know, which I'm not going to go into today, that many of our parents or women that are experiencing and dads we know can experience domestic abuse, grew up in homes themselves where domestic abuse was a factor. So really starting in pregnancy can help break that cycle, that intergenerational cycle of domestic abuse. And evidence suggests that exposure pre-birth and until the baby's second birthday can have that greatest impact. And interventions at this stage can prevent years of harm and abuse and those repeated cycles. Offering support during pregnancy to both co-parents, which is what we do, the parent using the abusive behaviour and the one experiencing the abusive behaviour, can harness parents' motivation to want to protect and care for their baby and make the changes necessary to give their baby a better start in life. I'm going to emphasise that it's that someone's got to have the motivation, but we believe with the right support, those causing harm can also change their behaviours. And we know pregnancy, many of the dads we work with said, it is pregnancy that about to become a dad, that they want to write a different script for their baby. So by giving the right safe support, but also with our programme, because we give the intensive support to the women as the victim of domestic abuse, they both go on their individual journeys. Both are getting that support, and we believe by increasing, and we see from our impacts data, that by increasing the support for the person causing harm, it increases victim safety as well. And I will say 50% probably of the co-parents that come onto the programme in pregnancy safely separate. And it is going back to what Caroline said, it's the safe separation that is so important, because somebody's doing it with the support and specialist support. Angelo, could you play the video for me?
The first few years are so important. Who you are as a person is set up in those first few years.
Both my mum and dad probably had their own challenges growing up. Certainly my mum did.
My dad was an alcoholic. He was very angry, very depressed.
Things were good and then they'd be bad, and there was a lot of instability.
I was a teenage delinquent, stealing cars, selling drugs, just making a nuisance of myself.
I learnt to be quiet and keep things inside, and then really escaped in my imagination, and that's where I came alive.
I met my girlfriend. It was kind of like in the movies.
It turned my world upside down. We had that bond.
And within 2 months of that, she was pregnant. I think we both kind of went into panic mode.
It was very stressful. The idea of being homeless and pregnant. Where are we going to get the money?
We started having quite bad arguments.
And he put his hands around my neck until I couldn't breathe. Which is what led us into For Baby's Sake.
I kind of came into the programme thinking, am I just broken beyond repair?
The practitioner, she helped me find so much clarity. It triggered me into a very dark place. Obviously we were dealing with domestic abuse, but it didn't feel like we were just pointing the finger.
He was very respectful, listened very carefully to what I was saying. How on earth are we going to have a kid? And just helped me come up with practical solutions.
To be able to work through these self-destructive patterns, make some peace with the past, putting tools in place to keep me safe and to keep him safe too.
At every stage we had someone that really was trained and knew what they were doing, explaining to us what our baby was going through. And we had more space for us to figure out our relationship.
It's allowed me to heal and come into myself. What are you doing? It's given me confidence to be a good mum.
I can be a bit less erratic now. I can live a normalish life and have a family.
He has two parents that want to do whatever it takes to be the best parents they can be for him.
He's had the best start in my family as far back as anyone can remember, and that is not an accident.
I don't know how many times the two of us have said thank God for baby's sake. It's been life-changing.
I think you agree, very impactful film, and told by the voices of two parents that were on the programme. That little boy is 7 now, so some sustained change as well. And it just helps me just move through that. So the criteria to come onto the programme is that there's a pregnancy, there's domestic abuse, and both co-parents want to join the programme, but they go on their individual journeys, as I've said, so I'm not going to go into too much information here. Most of the referrals into the teams come through safeguarding midwives or social workers that are doing an unborn baby assessment, but we also do take self-referrals and from other professionals as well. And it is really around a safeguarding framework. 5 minutes, let me move on. A safeguarding framework within that as well. Our trauma-informed approach is what offers the parents the opportunity, as I said, to reflect back on their childhood experiences and that they feel heard and their feelings are validated, which means they're able to make sense of themselves and be able to drive those behaviour changes. And as I said, it always works within a multi-agency safeguarding framework to keep everyone safe while working through the unresolved trauma. And there you can see we've got teams in the North East, the North West, London, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire and Essex. So that's the spreads where we've currently got teams. And then just want to touch a little bit about the neuroscience that we know now around babies' brain systems, and that it's actually shaped within the womb. And I do want to show you, if it will flick on, a film. And these are not our film, this is from the Royal Foundation for Early Childhood Development.
Throughout our lives, our brains play a role in everything we do. They are responsible for our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, for the choices we make, the way we treat others, how we cope with life's ups and downs, make friends, and fall in love. An emotionally healthy brain therefore helps us lead a healthy, happy life. And when you add it all up, that's what shapes our future society. Our brains continue to develop throughout our lives, but they do most of their growing when we're very young, which is why early childhood, the time from pregnancy to 5, matters so much. During this time, they produce an astonishing 1 million new connections every second, the fastest period of brain development in our entire lives. You might think that this happens automatically, according to a set of instructions. But in fact, our brains are constantly growing and adapting in response to our interactions with the outside world. And the most important interactions we have are with the adults around us. For example, when our young brain hears an adult speaking, it starts to build the connections we need to understand what they're saying and eventually to use words of our own. And it's the same for all the skills we are developing, even the things that aren't as easy to spot. Things like how willing we are to trust someone, or our ability to understand what someone else might be feeling. Things known as social and emotional skills. Skills which, as adults, we use on a daily basis. When we have adults who care for us, cuddle us, play with us, and show joy in us, this makes us feel safe, valued, and understood, and provides the steady emotional nourishment that our brains thrive on. Put simply, sensitive, responsive care is the key to developing an emotionally healthy brain. On the other hand, repeated experiences that feel very stressful or threatening can encourage our brains to grow in ways that can be limiting, meaning we might find it harder to adapt to life as an adult. Of course, with love and support, we can still overcome a difficult start in life. But the brain we develop when we're young forms the basis of the brain we have when we grow up. So, early childhood really is a golden opportunity to build the foundations for a happy, healthy life.
I wanted to play that because of the importance of why we need to break cycles of domestic abuse for babies, because it's such an important time and where we can make such a difference. These are just 2 tools we use within For Baby's Sake. Because of time, I'm not going to go through them. Many of you may use them in your practice. The newborn behaviour observation, video interaction guidance really support parents to bond and break cycles of domestic abuse by bonding with their baby and then hence safeguarding. If you hop over to our website, you'll see our impact report there with lots of stats about the impact that we're making in decreasing the number of police call-outs, the level of care within children's social care, our families from the beginning of the programme to the end. So you can look through the report that's on our website. On our website as well, we've got lots of resources. Please do go and take a look. To support parents where there's domestic abuse, but also mindfulness, relaxation, and national helpline numbers, and lots on trauma-informed care, and also breaking barriers down to asking questions about domestic abuse as well. So please do check that out. And just thank you so much for having us and listening to me today.
Well, thank you, Judith. I mean, that kind of feels more positive. And there are some, there are questions. I mean, obviously, given I mean, I think I found the figures. I mean, you know that when you kind of know that because of the reports that come out in the media, but to have them so stark, it's quite shocking, isn't it? I mean, one woman every 3 days killed, and that 100,000 babies affected every year. I mean, it's stunning, really. And I'm sure our audience will be asking more questions. I've got one question, and I'm using my little phone this time, not an extra screen. So I'm hoping it's going to work out okay. But I've got Gurkabash. Oh gosh, I don't know what's happened there. Hang on. Gurbakash. Sorry. Oh crikey. It's all gone a bit squiffy. Hang on. Where's it gone? And Gurkbash Dylan. Hi. Sorry with bad very pronunciation. It's coming through badly for me at the moment. Is asking, will the slides be shared to professionals? Now I'm not sure what that means, but I think everyone who's watching will have this presentation to refer back to, and some of the information is going to be really useful. And like I said right at the beginning, you might want to share it with colleagues. Also, you need to be aware of the trigger warnings, and you might want to watch this again quietly and kind of absorb the information because there's a lot of information, and I think Caroline and Judith are very aware of how much information is provided, and we'll have them back, I promise. So we have Anna Clayton is asking, this is a question for you, Judith, is For Baby's Sake national? I know you did give some information.
I went through it quite quickly. No, not at present. We've got the regional teams. So no, obviously it's our vision and mission to be able to do that, but not currently. So, but on our website, it shows in the areas where we currently are. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the slide towards the end. That's where you can access information. Of course, you've got it all online.
On our website as well. It's clear where we're working currently. But anyone wants to ask any questions, please reach out to the welcome at For Baby's Sake email address. It will reach me and I will respond. So yeah, please do reach out.
Fabulous, because I mean, I noticed a whole set of resources to access for people, and that's another reason you might want to go back into the presentation and use the little access buttons to get there. So that's for the audience really. And I'm thinking about now. I was thinking as I was listening to Caroline on how you kind of record people's position on that. Do you use the kind of that whole milestones when you're talking to women?
So yeah, I mean, I think we all of us use it in the office regularly. I think it's a really helpful way of understanding where we are, because it's a way of assessing risk actually, and that risk applies to mother and unborn baby or children in the home, and just understanding where we are on that and whether it has the potential to lead on to something incredibly dangerous. I mean, we need to understand how dangerous these relationships are, and this is a tool that does help that understanding. I'm often asked whether I actually talk to the women about this timeline, and I think that's a really complicated question. I don't actually as such, because I think the sort of homicide timeline title of it is in itself, I'm not wanting to frighten these women, but I think helping women to understand about tactics of abuse is really helpful, because so often they're led to think it's just because it's all their fault and it's all in their mind, and understanding how these are tactics is actually really helpful when I speak to women about that. So I do and I don't is the answer to that question.
Well, Judith was nodding away there. Did you want to add to the discussion?
No, I think the same, like Caroline said, it's really used as risk assessment, and that's what we're doing as well, because risk is dynamic, and sometimes people don't know their own safety or they don't understand, so it's just helping them with the power and control wheel as well, and the things on our website as well. We've got a parental relationship spectrum that really looks at the stages as well in questions to answers. So I think it's tools, and it's everyone adapting for their practice, isn't it? But it's, you know, reflecting back scenarios is another thing that we do. We use the SARA version 3 as our risk assessment tool. And it is about scenario planning. What do we think might happen? But also using that in a very understanding way with the women as well. But we also do it with those that are using abusive behaviours, what we're worried about, what, you know, so they understand, because though they're the ones with doing the control, quite often what sits beneath it, like Caroline said, around the jealousy and the power and control, but what's driving it. And for some, not all, understanding what's beneath that is what's going to help support them to get the support that they need to be able to do that work. But they have to do it themselves, not seek to blame, like Caroline said, you know, the victim.
Yeah, because I guess if some of the a person has been exposed to abuse all their lives, they might have that in their psyche. So have you got a way of knowing whether, you know, because some of this is about manipulation, and you kind of think, well, could somebody just go along with it, just to be able to with the sort of process that you have? Because it sounded so good to be able to get the two people working together and realize what the issues were for each other. It sounded great,
Yeah.
but are there some where it's never going to work? I guess that's
No, absolutely. It's got to be right. And just we don't work with co-parents together. They have their separate practitioner and they go on a separate journey, just so it's not about keeping families together. I think Caroline wanted to come into something.
Yes, I think she did.
So
sorry, Caroline.
No, you're fine. No, I was only going to say that I think what the kind of key thing that we take from that is that we've really focused on training midwives in understanding about controlling behaviors, that's what they're looking for, because sometimes that's the tip of the iceberg that you can see. You might see it in the wards, you might see it in community, you might see a very sort of overprotective partner. Controlling behaviors are sometimes the key in. So I think that's where it's really useful, just to get people to understand that that's in a way what sometimes we can see those behaviors.
And it's words using, you'll see on some of the tools on our website, is do you feel safe in your relationship, not is there domestic abuse, because often people don't. So it's, do you feel safe? What does it feel like at home? Are you able to go and do, you know, it's picking up on those things that are not able to have their own finances or be able to use the car, and really the isolation are key factors as well, if someone's isolated, you know, in their relationship as well. But the routine inquiry and finding ways to be able to do it, that's what we also work with lots of maternity units as well, to support midwives to be able to have the tools and to know then what to do next, you know, to make sure that you know, it's really referring on to specialist services, isn't it? And, you know, like specialist midwives as well. The support is there, isn't it? But it's just having the confidence.
I think that's really reassuring, because I know that midwives and anyone who's getting into routine inquiries, I think some of the fear is, well, if I ask this question, I might get an answer I can't cope with, and will I have to do everything all on my own, and I can't cope, and it's all too much. I mean, Caroline, how do you deal with that with practitioners?
This is the thing, we just really do, we do a lot of training around that, and also having somebody to refer to. We make sure that they know where to refer to, so in our area, what areas that they can refer to. And actually I think a lot of it starts with understanding, and I think, you know, they're not, the chances are that these people that they're seeing are going home to their perpetrator. So understanding how they can support them when they are there in the home with them. You know, the scenario of somebody coming in and needing refuge straight away is incredibly unusual. Barely happens in my experience, but what does happen is they're going home. So yeah, I think it's just encouraging midwives, like you say, to have the confidence to do it, to feel able to do it, to know that they can refer on, and that there are places that they can go even in the middle of the night. So just making sure that they've got those at their fingerprint, where to go, and not to be afraid of it, because women want to be asked. I think Judith mentioned this. Women again and again when they feedback, say that they want to be asked. They are only going to ask us if they tell us if they feel safe to do that. And they need to be asked. When you ask them, you are saying, I can do something, I'm here. But if you don't ask, they're not going to tell you. So we really, really do have to ask. And then, yes, as you said, and then I do know it's difficult. I was a community midwife. You have 20-minute appointments. It isn't easy, but just knowing those initial things to signpost to, that doesn't take long. And then follow up can take more time. But those initial signposting are really, really important.
And I think it's just letting somebody feel validated.
Yeah.
You've heard, those listening, those real sort of basic skills of hearing somebody, but not thinking you need to respond. Most women know their own safety, so they don't want to be told a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
But it's just then knowing that they can talk and have that specialist support and reach out again when they want to, if they're not ready to, if the cycle's going back to number one. Then but they know then as it builds up, they know who they can reach out to.
No, I think that's incredibly helpful. Thank you for that. There's a good discussion there. I've got another question. Amy, hi Amy, wants to know, can professionals refer even if it is well out of area?
To us,
I guess, Amy, that you might have to clarify, Amy. That's just the way questions come.
It sounds like if they're out of area, no, they can't refer to us currently if we haven't got a site there, but they can speak to us, so reach out, and then we can offer support as well. Do you know what I mean? And refer to some of the resources. So it's always better to reach in, and then we'll let somebody know. We're always happy to hear from people.
You may not be able to help, but you know someone who can.
Yes.
I guess that's the thing. And I guess as a midwife, you need to know your locality really well and what resources and services you have got that you can offer women. And often you kind of don't learn that until you have to. I know this as a midwife where, you come across a woman and you've done the stuff in theory and in as a student midwife, for example, and it's only when you then have to deal with a situation that you realise actually you do need to know where things are and who to approach, and to make sure you've got senior midwifery support as well and other links with other agencies. So that's a great question, Amy. Thank you. And I've got Anna Clayton. Hang on, this is two questions, I'm sure, Anna. You've already had one question, but I'll give you another one. Where is the best place to signpost women to?
So I'll start with that only because I'm afraid it's a postcode lottery. I mean, it's really, really inconsistent across the UK. There should be a specialist advocacy within all areas. We have something called DAS in my area, DAS Impact, who are our first line of referral. Some trusts are lucky enough to have an independent domestic violence advisor, but not all. And sometimes in order to get an advert, they have to score more than 14 on a dash. So that's not necessarily going to be available to all women, but there will be in all, I'm sure Judith will agree, in all areas, there will be a support which is your kind of first line of referral, and your safeguarding leads should know that.
And I think also there's the helplines, there's the national helpline as well, and there will be local ones as well. But also if there's, again, say to increase safety for women and babies, it's ensuring you know where the support is for someone if they reaches out who are being abusive, that want support for their behaviour, want to stop it. So it's also making sure in your areas you know where those behavioural change programs also support is as well for those, because that's going to keep everybody safe and break the cycle as well.
I have to say, I said to Judith and Caroline right at the beginning of this session, this hour is the fastest in the week, and this is no different. My goodness, my brain is buzzing actually with the information that Judith and Caroline have shared. It's been fantastic, and thank you so much for putting such a lot in to give us some thought. I know that many people are going to have to rerun that, but actually that's a good thing, but remember, I have to say, if you've been impacted, check out the resources, and I know Paul's got those available, and there are plenty of support networks that will support you if you've been affected by this. But actually, I think the numbers that Caroline and Judith are both talking about are quite shocking. They're quite shocking, and we need to address this, but we also need to be caring of ourselves. So I'm underline it. I'm going to say huge thank you to Judith and Caroline. I think our audience will probably agree we need to have you back at some point to kind of carry on the story and maybe look at some of the other strategies in the future. And also, I want to say a big thank you to Angela, who's making sure this is all recorded. So when you replay this, it's perfect. It's coming out as a podcast on Friday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. For those of you keen on that, 6 o'clock in the morning, no. But next week also on Wednesday as part of the newsletter. If you're new to the Maternity Midwifery Forum, check out and subscribe to the newsletter, because we do nice little chunky articles there, but also you get the kind of links into the sessions that we've done, which is really useful. And I mustn't forget, next week, same time, same place, we have Professor Sue Down, who'll be discussing evidence and its application to midwifery practice in supporting women. So I think that would be a really good, well, it's always good. They're always good sessions. Don't we do well? And thank you so much to our audience, who also have been fantastic, because somebody, I've got to go back at this pesky thing. This is all due to being away, of course. Anna Clayton, who's asked a couple of questions, has also said this is such an awesome session. And don't you all agree? So thank you so much to everybody. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Take care.